They said my land was perfect for a shortcut, so I turned it into a dead end. And the wildest part is, I didn't raise my voice once. I live just outside a place called Brook Hollow, the kind of town that used to have more tractors than traffic lights. And 15 years ago, I bought 5 acres there, a long, skinny wedge between Millstone Road and Alder Creek Drive. Back then, Millstone was patient and two-lane Alder Creek was more gravel than promise, and I bought the land because I needed space to breathe. I built a modest one-story house with a wide porch and a creaky swing, planted a few maples, ran a split-rail fence along the front mostly for looks, and left the back half open, a field that caught the evening sun and held crickets like secrets. For a long while, nothing happened, which is to say, everything was exactly as it should be. Then Brook Hollow started growing an office park. Sprouted off Millstone Alder Creek was widened. A subdivision called Copper Ridge rose up like a tidy little crop, and the traffic thickened, the way soup does when you forget it on the stove. I noticed it properly on a late September evening, iced tea, sweating in my glass sun, slipping behind the trees when I saw headlights where headlights had no business being, cutting diagonally across my field like someone following a mental map they'd never asked to borrow. The cars didn't skid, they didn't swerve, they moved clean and straight, as if this had been a road their whole lives. I walked down the porch, slow boots sinking a little in the soft ground, and there it was, a 10-foot wide strip of flattened grass running from one road to the other, an impromptu ribbon of asphalt in my backyard. Curiosity turned to tally. I sat with coffee the next morning, a folding chair by the window, and between 7:10 and 8:10 a.m., I counted 27 vehicles. Sedans, pickups, a delivery van with a smiling arrow on the side. Not one slowed or waved, they cut through like my field was negative space. It's a strange, small violence watching people treat your backyard like an inconvenience that doesn't need permission. The grass started to die, the soil packed hard, and then the trash came, a crushed soda cup, a fast food bag, a cigarette butt abandoned like a bookmark in someone else's chapter. I could have gone theatrical, 8-foot privacy panels, razor wire, a war of signs and lawyers, but I didn't want to start a war. I wanted clarity. So I called Miguel, a landscaper who'd helped me years back, and who measures twice cuts once and doesn't talk much unless it's worth saying. He came out, walked the line with me, pressed his palm into the compacted dirt like a man feeling another person's weather, and said, "They've driven this enough." Not a moral claim, just a fact. That realization was the twist that moved me from being annoyed to being deliberate. It wasn't one reckless teenager, it wasn't a prank. It had become a habit, and habits calcify into assumed rights if nobody intervenes. Miguel suggested a drainage swale boring, practical, a thing that would carry water and make the crossing an engineering decision rather than a casual shortcut. I called Denise, a soil engineer from Cedar Falls, and she came out, peered at the slope, took measurements, and said, "You probably should have done this years ago," which felt like both a diagnosis and permission. We drew up plans for an 18-inch deep swale, gravel line shaped to channel runoff, and to be inconvenient enough that someone couldn't just glide across without thinking. I filed the paperwork at county planning under drainage improvement. I wasn't hiding anything. The county checked zoning and environmental impact. There were no easements on my survey, nothing that said this diagonal track belonged to anyone but me. So on a Thursday morning, Miguel brought a small excavator and made a steady mechanical sound while the field changed shape into something intentional. The first evening, someone hit it. A silver crossover accelerated like always, front wheels dipped into the swale, and the car stopped in a cloud of dust. The driver sat a long moment, probably doing quick arithmetic in his head, and then backed out awkwardly, tires kicking. I didn't smile because this wasn't about taking pleasure at someone else's expense. It was about recalibration. The next morning, confusion spread faster than traffic ever had. Delivery drivers hesitated, a school bus aborted a half-hearted attempt, commuters slowed as if they'd discovered an old law they'd never obeyed on purpose. Communities don't like being inconvenienced. Mrs. Donnelly, my neighbor across Alder Creek who treats online drama like morning soap, called me laughing. "You're trending," she said. "They call you the porch troll." It stung and tickled at once. A week later, Nathan Price from Municipal Planning called with the polite pressure governments carry. When voters grumbled, neighbors were complaining that my drainage installation blocked an informal access route. He asked if I could modify the swale to allow limited passage or if the city might buy the land. I said I was maintaining my property, and that was that for the polite part of the conversation. For years it reduced congestion, and they were willing to make it official, gravel it, maintain it, even compensate me. Compensation is a tempting word. Money patches over discomfort, but it also erases a boundary. We talked for a long time about hours and vehicle classes, about liability and signage. He offered fairness. I asked for limits. The real unexpected pivot came when Trent left the first time exhausted and came back the second time humbled. Negotiation slid into the territory of contingency and limits. We agreed to one controlled crossing, a reinforced concrete culvert through a narrow part of the swale, heavy removable bollards I could lock after hours, clear signage with published times, a camera funded by them, and an ironclad clause: any violation, immediate termination. They would notify employees, carry insurance, accept liability. I insisted the swale remain everywhere else. It was symbolic maybe, but more practical lines matter. We signed papers at a small title office with no fanfare, just the soft hum of a copier sealing something that had started as tire tracks. The crossing got built. It looked purposeful and not like a public road, conditional, regulated, deliberate. On the first morning at 7:02 a.m., cars slowed, read the sign, crossed at the designated point. At 6 p.m., Miguel and I slid the bollards into place, and the sound of metal settling into housing was quietly satisfying. For the first time in months, the field looked like a field again. Then the little justice moment came, precise and oddly satisfying. At 6:23 p.m., a white pickup tried to weave around the locked barrier, misjudged a gentler slope a few feet down, and bottomed out with an embarrassing scrape. The driver rocked and cursed and then called a tow. I walked out, said evening, and the exchange was clean. He had driven on private property, after hours ignored a barrier and got stuck. Trent called within 10 minutes. Panic had replaced polished corporate tone. The clause worked. The message landed. Slowly, grass crept back over the old tire grooves, like nature reclaiming a sentence someone else had tried to write. The crossing stayed open when it should have been and closed when it shouldn't. A young couple from Copper Ridge stopped by months later to thank me. They admitted they'd been angry at first, but after the system settled, commutes were safer and fewer near misses happened. Some folks who'd called me selfish online grudgingly admitted the difference when rules were enforced. If there's a lesson here, it's modest and a little stubborn. Boundaries matter. Convenience always has a cost, and if we let convenience be the law, the cost gets extracted quietly from someone else, often the property owner, often the person who didn't volunteer. I didn't build a ditch out of spite. I built it because ownership without boundaries is suggestion, and suggestion is the quickest path to assumption. The satisfying ending wasn't cinematic. No courtroom reveal, no headline screaming justice, just locked bollards at dusk, a tow truck receipt filed in a drawer, a camera that told the truth when needed, and an agreement that actually meant something. The diagonal scar faded. The controlled crossing stayed where it belonged. People learned limits slowly, grudgingly, then gratefully. So here's the question I want you to argue about in the comments. When a community's convenience runs headfirst into an individual's rights, who should give? Is there a point where public need outweighs private boundary? Or does that slide us down a slippery slope where the loudest and busiest take what they want? Would you have fenced it off completely, sold an easement without conditions, or done exactly what I did and turned a convenience into a conversation? Drop your thoughts below. Tell me your own boundary story. And if you like real messy conflicts that end with something resembling justice, hit like, subscribe, and stick around. Sometimes the biggest fights happen in the smallest yards.